If you're like us, there are many points during our journeys where all of us wish that there was a map or a blueprint, some sort of guide to help us in our life, to help us through making our decisions and ensuring that we're all on the right path. Many of us are really seeking a truer connection, a higher purpose. And without this, we can feel lost or confused, often feeling very lonely, unsatisfied because our lives feel meaningless. And really, at the heart of it, all of humanity is here to explore the vast reaches of human consciousness and potential. Are you also a seeker of the mysteries of life? You're not alone. We are in a time of immense change, a reawakening and transition for humanity and the planet. And just like the planet is changing, so is humanity. And we know that we are also in a time of great genetic mutation. And this is what science calls emergent behavior. There's a sudden leap in evolution happening now. And there's nothing to fear. In fact, this has always been part of the design. We are all children of this planet, this living, sentient being. And we are growing and changing with her. A new intelligence is birthing, and many are seeking deeper connection, purpose, and meaning in their lives. And we are all being called to come into alignment with nature and with ourselves, to assist this process of global transformation and awakening, so that all of us can make the quantum leap. With this mutation, new abilities are developing within humanity. Many have heightened senses like telepathy and clairvoyant episodes, seemingly superhuman-like abilities. And this is becoming more and more common. And there are many labels for these types of mutations, including HSPs, or highly sensitive people. Some say indigos, starseeds, crystal children, empaths. You have had many experiences, synchronicities, seemingly strange events that have led you up to this point. You've sought out teachers, gurus, practices, books, videos, always seeking the truth, trying to find the truth about you, your purpose, and this world. In the past, tribal societies would turn to wisdom keepers, elders, astrologers, oracles, and other figures within the tribe for their guidance. And at Soul Mapping, we provide a modern example of this. Science now confirms what many spiritual systems have known all along, that this reality is like a hologram, a womb, a simulation, or a dream, just waiting for the veil to lift, for you to pop out on the other side, reborn as what you were always meant to be. With quantum mechanics and string theory, we know that reality is much different than we once thought, and that there is way more going on than meets the eye. What we provide here is practical guidance for experiencing and operating in this new type of aware reality. We know exactly what it feels like to seek and not quite getting the embodiment you are looking for. We wanted to feel it, to actually know and embody our highest purpose here. And soul mapping was birthed out of what we wished existed as we walked our path of self-discovery. At one time, tools such as astrology, alchemy, yoga, tai chi, sacred plant medicine, and other spiritual sciences were all used in synthesis. It's only been in the past few hundred years that humanity has objectified nature and reality, disenchanting meaning, which is what we really need to connect. But all challenges have their gifts. So many beautiful developments in technology and science have been brought about. It is the latest of these developments that now allow us to bridge science and spirituality back together. And soul mapping bridges these sciences between the spirit and modern, nature and technology, subjective and objective, and all other dualistic natures of this reality. And we know that everything has its place and that it is time to balance and integrate. It is our mission to bring together practical and tested tools, experience, and teaching that can be effective for humanity's transition into a more unified and harmonious intelligence, guiding us through this transition. Imagine if you had a map of your soul, a map of your true nature and your energy, literally a guide back to alignment with your source, to the embodiment of your expanded self, with precise insight of your psyche, and the shadows that kept you feeling stuck and bringing resistance in your life. Mapping out your unique gift that you are here to embody and share with the world. Soul mapping has a unique journey to guide you here. We can not only give you your map, but we will guide you through this path of rediscovering your true, authentic nature and realization of your power as a creator of your reality. Using practical techniques and methods for taking back the power from any of your fears and doubts, working through your traumas, conditioning, and imprints. This message you are hearing now is an aspect of your expanded self, giving you exactly what your true self asked for. We assist you in tapping back into yourself so that you can become your own authority and teacher. By accessing your unique blueprint and giving yourself a very complete map of your psycho-spiritual anatomy of both personal and the collective energies, we can integrate and align with our gifts, shadows, and ultimately our higher purpose, our unique path. Because we live in an illusion of separateness, we must know ourselves in order to unveil the illusion. We are here to awaken the unique, differentiated passenger consciousness. Therefore, we have the privilege to know ourselves and how to navigate the program. By bringing the various aspects and dimensions of ourself into alignment, we cause a ripple and shift within the entire reality we are each experiencing.
Okay, so there's many different types of ways to look at and interpret energy that's going on in our reality so that we can understand what's going on in ourselves, because we are part of a fractal. The existence is a fractal. And that's why people study astrology, is because when we look at the stars in the sky, that being the macrocosm, it's not because we're looking to see what the stars are causing on Earth below, but we are seeing what energy is taking place so that we know what kind of energy we're also dealing with.
When we combine these systems with the proper processes, we can align the collective organism with nature to bring humanity back into alignment with the Earth.
We know that the universe works perfectly, and that there's a vast order that, it has a vast, perfect order within it. A lot of people might even say that this is like advanced geometry of the living universe. And when we look at these different aspects of the universe, whether it be our internal selves or if we're looking at the planets, everything we can look at has a synchronicity with each other. So, for example, when people are studying the planets and we see that they're moving at different speeds, if you were able to look, if you were able to live for a couple of 100 years, you would see that these planets have a very particular pattern and order to them. So what this is really indicating is that the universe is interconnected and alive. And normally in science, and like back in the day, they used to say that like space was empty, or this whole concept of empty space, and that nothing is really going on there. That was actually not correct. It's been proven that a lot more is going on within the space. Yeah, basically this concept of empty space really is something that we all need to look at, because when they find out, and they've already found out that 99.999% of the stuff that's happening in the universe is coming from this quote unquote empty space, All right, so we're talking about how the universe has this perfect order, and that, you know, if you're looking at the macrocosm of the planets and their synchronicity with each other, what science and spirituality is really coming to the conclusion of is that everything in the universe is connected and alive. And what I was trying to bring in was the concept of the empty space, and that back in the day, about 500 years ago, when a scientist named Copernicus declared that the Earth was, you know, no longer the center of the universe, that was his hypothesis, then many scientists started to question it, and, you know, it got rejected at first and eventually became accepted. And what happened to that is that we started to separate everything out. So meaning that as we overly objectified the universe, meaning we only accepted things that we could see, touch, hear, taste, smell, measure with our senses and the like limited tools that humanity has, it really started to create this type of reality where everything's separate, you know, like you're separate from other people, the planets are separate from themselves, like everything in life became kind of isolated, and that people were just these insignificant beings floating on a rock around the sun, you know, no longer being the center of the universe. So what we are finding out is that that's not true, that there's actually a lot of information within the quote unquote empty space of things. So scientists have found out that most of what's going on in the universe actually takes place in this empty space. Okay, so the stuff that you can't always see or you can't touch, or, you know, it's difficult to measure, even though they now have the capacity to measure a lot of it. And there's a scientist named Nassim Haramein who proposes that maybe it's not the material world that defines space, but maybe it's space that defines the material world, which is really interesting concept to think about. Or we can even think of it kind of like a metaphor of being part of some larger being, and that we are living within this fractal universe. And we are really here to experience the dance of being a creator and the creation at the same time. So that's why there's a lot of confusion, you know, within the spiritual community of, oh yeah, you create your own universe, like manifestation, the secret, you know, if you can just envision it, you will create it. And then there's this other aspect where it's like, well, we are also the creation. Okay, because we have to align with the creative aspect of the universe to be able to actually participate in the creation. Okay, and that's what these secret languages of spirit really do, is they're tapping us into and experiencing a higher intelligence so that we can align with it. It's the same intelligence that makes your heart beat or your neurons fire without you having to think about it or remember to do it. This intelligence exists, you know, we have the ability to tap into it. And what soul mapping does is we aim to bring several different systems and fields of study together to bridge many gaps between these systems, which is really kind of an uncommon approach in this type of field. You know, I'm not saying that there's nobody else out there doing it, but I do see, you know, a lot of different practitioners or teachers saying that their way is the only way, or, you know, this astrology is the best astrology and all the other astrologies aren't right. And, you know, everybody's trying to figure out, well, no, this is right and that's wrong. So what we want to do is help bridge several of these different gaps, because we see value in several different types of systems, and, you know, including different astrologies and the I Ching and human design and lots of other esoteric practices and arts and holistic healing methods and all of these type of things. They're really just defining different angles of these secret languages of the universe. Okay, And when we can understand and align with them, we bring together a balance of the creative forces of the universe, which is the divine feminine and masculine forces, the yin and the yang, so that we can be the creation or the experience or the essence that comes out of that pure love from those forces in the universe to bring forth the true humanity.
Human design is more of an awakening process, not so much of a teaching. It's really providing us with practical tools to rediscover and realign ourselves to our true nature. And what we've learned with human design is that every chart has its unique purpose and pathway, and it is a blueprint indicating to us what our vehicles are here to do, which is to process and create with the energy that we are receiving and transmitting.
So many people are wanting to know their correct path for themselves. So if somebody came to you right now and said, Danielle, tell me my correct path, what would you tell them?
Well, I would tell them that there's a way to find within themselves the correct path. And it's not about figuring out all the details of the path. Because I think a lot of people, when we're like really trying to figure out our purpose or like what path is correct for us, we're trying to use our mind. You know, we're trying to figure out our life with, you know, strategizing from our mind. And that's a lot of times what actually leads us to suffering. And, you know, we understand that the mind and the way that it operates is that it's coming from a place of conditioning a lot of times, where from our past, like our traumas, you know, society, culture, and our parents, people that were around, you know, and what we understand about like the subconscious and how the mind works is that a lot of times we're not even really making decisions as ourselves. And that even the motivations for things can be coming from this place of like, you know, something that I learned in the past from somebody else. So actually it's better to know who you are, right? So that you can understand how your psyche truly functions, you know, and still not making decisions about your life using your mind. And I think that this is one of the most common things that people try to do that leads them down the path of suffering. So if someone came to me and was like, hey, how do I find my path, or what is my path? You know, I would need to look at their exact map. And this is why we can use languages of the universe like astrology and gene keys and human design, because it's really showing us how interconnected everything is. And we can look at all of these different angles of energy and information to understand exactly who you are, so that you don't have to figure out your path, but you'll know how to make decisions so that you're actually on the right path.
Okay. This is a system that shows you how to find your own answers.
So I want you to imagine for a moment living your soul's authentic purpose and also thriving while doing it. Maybe you're sitting at a job right now that doesn't really resonate with you. You're starting to kind of like awaken to a new idea of who you are and who you want to express yourself in the world as. And that job that you currently have just really isn't lining up with it anymore. Or maybe you already know your soul's mission and purpose here, but you really feel like it could be thriving on a deeper level, that you could be taking it somewhere deeper and more fulfilling and really having a greater impact with that soul's mission and message.
When we're talking about aligning on our path, how do we know that it's the correct path for us? How do we know it's not coming from a conditioning, that someone told us to go on this path? Imagine being able to tap into your own intelligence within inside yourself to know that you're on the correct path for you.
Your life is a culmination of all of your decisions up until right now. Are you ready to be able to make all of your decisions with clarity and confidence? Are you ready for your entire experience of life to change? by learning the mechanisms of existence and tapping into your own unique blueprint. It is time to exit the fear realm and reorient your soul's geometry with its true potential. The answers are within you. Your soul desires truth. This truth is a permission slip to be who you truly are, to shine forth like a gem in all of its uniqueness.
By recognizing and healing inner child wounding, by learning the basics of our unique astrology, our human design, our genetic codes, our strategy and authority, our activation sequences and centers, we will all learn who we are, and based on our unique imprints, we will be able to make decisions in a confident way. Recent findings in certain sciences have been able to show us how all aspects of our reality are interconnected like a holographic web-like structure. Our body, mind, the environment, the planet, all the way on up in every level and dimension, there is an interdependence between the whole and the part.
How do we know? How does somebody know if they're operating from the mind? Because we're so conditioned, right, to use the mind. So how can we start to separate ourselves from that so we can start to recognize, are these decisions that I'm making from the mind, or are they correct for me?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, I mean, one of the first concepts to understand is that we are a binary consciousness. So we're not the mind. We all probably should know that already. The mind is a tool that we can use to share the human experience and, you know, logic and research. And it's very entertaining, but it's not here to make decisions for us. Okay. So that's one part of our consciousness, and that's who we think that we are, right? So that's like one consciousness. And the other aspect of the binary consciousness is everything else that's not the mind. So, you know, we can call it the form consciousness, the vehicle, the body, everything else that is not the mind. So really, when we come to learning to make decisions about our lives from our place of sovereignty, not from conditioning, we need to understand that the form consciousness is actually the aspect that has the inherent intelligence to run the life already without needing to figure it out. It doesn't need the mind. So really putting the mind in the proper place, right, as the passenger, so that it can be the observer, right? And that's what we're here doing, is really activating the passenger consciousness, the observer consciousness, self-reflected consciousness, and knowing that that has its own role, and then letting the life be lived by the form, right? So as we do that, we surrender into where the life is meant to head anyways, and use the mind to, you know, be the passenger in the vehicle as you're going through life, so you can extract out the consciousness that you're here to extract out.
So someone could be following a path, finding their path, but it might not be the correct path for them.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and that's the thing. A lot of people that I've worked with, I'm sure you have too, you know, all of us, we want to find out why we're here. Why do we exist? You know, what is our purpose? And that is actually in our genetics, like in our codes, in the DNA. It's like we're here, even in this era, in this evolutionary time space of trying to figure out why we exist. And this is part of why, you know, even how our consciousness is formed and everything, how it's really bringing about an answer to that in this time period, even though we don't know. But in the microcosm, meaning per each individual, we're all trying to figure out why we exist, what our purpose is. And so when we try to do that with the mind, we're probably going down paths that are not correct.
Are purpose and path the same thing?
I think that it would be good to probably define those terms, for sure, because it is very vague and abstract. What I understand is that each one of us, and this is what I believe, is here to process out certain things, right? So we are receiving information. We live, you know, imagine you're being bombarded by energy all the time, and you're processing and extracting with it, you're creating with it. You know, you're the creator and the creation. So your path or your purpose is to be yourself, which is not a vague thing either. You know, that is it's a very tangible thing that we can understand. And being ourselves is not like, oh, well, I'm in a place and I'm just going to be what I think I am. It's all the things that, you know, how you operate, what your mechanisms are, your functions, and there's no morality around it. You know, it's like.
So something just came through for me when you were saying that, but could purpose be lived out naturally when we find the correct path, when we understand what the correct path is for us?
Yes. Yeah, I really like that. And that's the intended goal with soul mapping, is to help people to just surrender and be into them, you know, be aligned with themselves and knowing who they are, so they can surrender into the path or the purpose really like unfolding. And that's their purpose, you know, is to allow the path to unfold how it needs to be. And through that, their purpose is to experience and to witness, you know, what is happening.
We live in a dualistic universe, okay? But that's why there's always this kind of like conversation about dualism and oneness and timelessness, and we're stuck in time, and masculine and feminine, and yin and yang, and, you know, all these things. We are basically, if we think of our bodies and our beings as the center of creation, because we are the points between heaven and earth, our physical bodies, okay, between these two very opposite energies. And this is on all different layers within the realms, that these different energies are right next to each other. And we are at the point of the center of that, where they're coming together. So what we do is we transmit and receive and reorder and essentially create with that energy. So with that being said, everything can either be like a shadow or it can be a gift. And the whole thing really is to balance things out. And when we are aware of which energies are working, we can actually put those into conscious creation, rather than being a victim of, oh, this happened to me, or, you know, something like that. Yeah, so it talks about genetics as well, and then also quantum mechanics. So a little bit about what I was just talking about, where, you know, we are essentially at the point of creation and reality. And when we're in alignment with our form, if you've heard of people saying like, come into alignment, or, you know, becoming attuned, and these type of phrases that are like, you know, the new spiritual lingo. It's really about getting away from the mind, okay? Because the mind needs to be our ally, but the mind's nature is to create dualism, okay? And its purpose on, you know, our existence is to communicate to the other. It's to research, to share stories. It's always for the other. And the problem that humanity has gone through is that the mind has been turned inwards on ourselves, okay? Because the mind's job is the interpreter of the infinite cosmos, because we are taking in everything at once, okay? That's why we have this huge infinite capacity in the gray areas of our brain, because every single moment when people say inspiration, we are inspiring, we are breathing in the universe every second. Now, the thing is what is our access to it? What kind of access do we have to the gray areas of our brain? Well, the pineal gland is really the point where the pressure is released, and it's released when we are able to be what they call like an external authority to the other. And don't worry, we'll get into this more, but the point that I'm saying is that the mind has turned inwards, so we turn our confusion, which is similar to inspiration. They come in as two forms. We've turned that inwards on ourselves. So what we're doing is aligning with our form. So it means putting the mind as the passenger in the car. Okay, the mind is there to observe. It's there to communicate what it's seeing, and to be this interpreter of this vast amount of information that we're always receiving It's just how much are we pulling up into our awareness, and how much do we have access to, because our bodies, all these centers, all these geometric shapes, the chakras, all of these are receiving information that a lot of times we're not really aware of. But when people talk about expansion or ascension, what they're really talking about is being able to take this stimuli that we're receiving on all of these other, extremities of our being, and being able to pull them up into our awareness to make, a more enriched and empowered environment for ourselves to consciously create. When you're looking at the chart, you see two things. There's colored in centers. You have like the yellow, the green. It doesn't matter what color they are. They're colored. Okay. And then you have white. So this is actually what your aura is shaped like. A lot of times people talk about, the colors of auras. But what we actually know now is that the aura has a specific shape, because it's much more than just colors. The shape that it's coming out as is the colored in areas. Okay, just think of that all as transmitting. So when you go into a room, that's output. That's what's coming out of you. All those colored in sections. Okay, so you have the head center. Below that, you have the ajna, which is the green. We'll get into each one of these. The throat, the G center, the yellow G center, the red triangle, ego or heart center, and the center on the left, which is the spleen. These are the centers when you walk into a room that are bringing your essence, okay? And there's, each one of those has those numbers within them, which are the archetypes, which are your shadows, which all your shadows are your superpowers. Each one of those superpowers has specific attributes, so it goes very deep. Now, the white centers, those specific areas are, including the white lines. And the white centers, those are the areas where you are here and you're receiving, okay? You're receiving energy from the transits, what the planetary movements, whatever is activating. And more than that is, you're receiving it from being around other people. Our charts interact. So you're taking in through your white areas. If they have them colored in, you're taking in their defined areas, because they call the colored in spaces defined, and the white areas undefined. So wherever you are defined, you are like transmitting that information into the other person's white areas or undefined areas, and vice versa. So basically, this is where we get our conditioning. Okay, so conditioning is not always bad, but if we make decisions from conditioning, we're not in alignment with our highest, true nature. So that's really what this whole system is about, is getting us back into our true nature. Because at the end of the day, this is really about radical self-acceptance. My entire purpose in reading this to you and transmitting this information is really solely just to get you to actually authentically accept yourself and to realize what is not you. Because the white areas are the parts that we often think is us, but it's really the conditioned areas. And we get confused by it because, every time we're around somebody else that has this defined centers and we don't have them defined and we're getting the conditioning, when we leave them, we're confused because it's not consistent. And the white centers amplify those realms. And again, this system is really about revealing and realigning us with our true nature. And in doing so, we can identify the conditioning and realizing that is not our true selves.
That there is no such thing as morality.
Right.
So is there such thing as a right decision or a wrong decision?
Wow, that's a good question. So a lot of this comes down to no choice, right? Mm-hmm. So we have to understand this first. But there is a choice, but there's no choice. It's duality, right?
Yes. It brings the mystery.
Yeah.
And magic.
And like what you said before, the both end.
The both ends. Yeah.
I love that.
Absolutely.
But yeah, basically, there is, I guess you can kind of think about it like that there is like a correct path or a correct choice, a correct direction, but it's not in the sense of morality, like good or bad, because it actually doesn't matter for the greater whole of existence, right? Because consciousness is experimenting right now with these different combination of genetics that create these different passengers and vehicles, and what can they find in the universe? What can each of us extract out on all these different levels? So the correctness would be you being yourself and in the correct space, you know, going down your road, your path, not going down a path that someone else told you to do unless it was correct for you, right? Because you can take advice from others if it's correct, but you have to know by tapping into yourself and checking in with your own self first. Like, is this the correct thing for me? Or am I just going because the mind's like, oh, go over here. You know, the child in the vehicle, the mind is like the child. It's the passenger. It doesn't really know where it's going, and it's trying to grab the steering wheel. You know, and this is where we get into the dilemmas and why the planet is in the state that it's in. And it's all part of the purpose of the greater path of humanity. You know, we had to go through this in order to find the truth, right? So we had to go down the path of entropy and chaos and suffering, and, you know, because we're all in this evolutionary pathway right now.
So from what I understand of what you're saying is that there's no right or wrong. There's no really good or bad. It's correct and incorrect based on what we're extracting from the path that we choose to be on.
Yeah.
The extraction is going to be different.
Yeah.
What we choose.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. And so, I mean, when you make a correct decision as yourself, then you're doing what you're here to do, right? So that would be the correctness, right? Whereas if you're making a decision or doing something from this other place, this conditioning, then it's, you know, you're extracting out something else, but you're like priming your vehicle. Your vehicle is not going to really be able to go the distance. You know, it's going to drag you closer to death.
Yeah. Well, and also the visual I get as well too is, say you go to like you go mining for gems, right? And you're mining and it's you're getting all these beautiful gems coming out because you're making the correct decisions for yourself. But if you're not, like, you're almost like, imagine yourself in this mine where you're like, keep digging and you keep digging and nothing's really coming up, or you might get like the fool's gold or something like that, right? Something that's going to trick you,
right?
But it's not really like the real correct gem for you, what you went there for.
Right.
And it's frustrating, or you get angry, or you get bitter, or you have all of these experiences with that. And that's how the visual I'm getting as well too.
Yeah, definitely. Because even knowing when you're in the correct alignment, you know, it doesn't mean that you're like everything's gonna be perfect, but everything is perfect. You know, even though the mind is going, yeah, but that's good or bad. I don't know. Morality comes from the mind. Yeah. You know, the duality of like this or that. That's what the mind does. It's a tool. But it means, like, when you're in the correct alignment, that you're going to know that all these things are good for you, or, you know, not really good for you, but you start to see the beauty of what it means to be human, which is not about being perfect. You know, it's about accepting yourself truly.
Well, and also it's redefining these words that we have put definitions to, like perfection.
Yeah.
Right. Like integrity, things like that. Right.
Yeah.
That as we can redefine these things so that they are actually correct for us, then we can move into perfection.
Yeah.
But it's not the perfection that we think because of conditioning.
Yes.
Or the mind that it is.
Exactly.
Something completely different.
Yep. Because even perfection could be something dying, something falling apart, something that, like, the mind is like, I really wanted to hang on to that and I couldn't, you know? So yeah, the perfection can be, you know, maybe what society would deem as like bad, but there's a perfection in it, you know? So yeah, definitely seeing the beauty of being human and being able to go through that process is what it looks like when you're in alignment. You know, not just looking out and seeing all the fool's gold, all the suffering of the planet. Yes, that's there, but there's a perfection in it. Everything does have a purpose. You know, we're each here to be ourselves and extract consciousness, and that's literally everyone's path, and it has a very unique look for each one of us.
Yeah,
because we're all in these different angles of the whole.
this is really what it means when you've probably heard people say like, oh, I'm, going through an ascension process, or I'm going to the 5D, or, it's all about expansion and expanding your consciousness. And there's actually a very practical application for this, and it comes with an understanding of how perception works, because we can literally expand our consciousness by having access to further reaching stimuli that we are actually able to bring in and pull in and bring up into a conscious awareness. So that's why when we start to look at these different systems, we start to understand, the languages of nature and the cycles of the universe, that we are actually expanding. We are actually taking our bodies, all of our dimensional bodies, out into this, further reaching aspect to make a bigger picture, a more enriched value and meaning to our life. And in doing this, it's really important to understand that we are also just the passengers, and that the bodies that we're living in are our vehicle. And we're here and we're refining our vehicles, and what the most important part of that is that we are meant to actually be a unique, differentiated being, okay, unlike any other person alive. And with these secret languages of spirit, it's going to align you with your true nature to recenter you. And these aspects are really like blueprints of how your vehicle processes, because we're each different. All of us are different in how we process and how we transmit and create with the energy. And this type of work is bringing us back into our own energy, so that we can come to a place of surrendering to what we actually are, and realizing that our mind is not in charge. So this is really about like letting go and watching our movie, because we don't actually have control. The creative aspects of the universe, which yes is in us and we are, that is the aspect that's actually in control. And we are going to do another separate video on the mind, which is its own thing, and it's a very important tool, but we need to put it in its proper place of being the passenger and not in control of our lives, because it is a filter of our consciousness that dictates to us a story that it thinks we need to know of what kind of stimuli we need to pull up into our perception, and leaving out a lot of other information that could be more useful. And most of what's coming up with the mind a lot of times is fears and anxieties, doubts and confusion, trying to get to the mystery and just, driving yourself crazy with conditioning and programming and those types of aspects. So really, all of us are here to see and to communicate and to talk to each other truthfully, to process out this mental plane together. And that's really what our mind is for, is to communicate to each other, to be the objective observer and the researcher. And the mind is for the other person. The mind is not to make your own decisions in your life. There is a higher aspect within you that works faster than the mind, that is picking up on more stimuli, that is actually able to guide you in your decisions when you are able to tap into it. We're going to start by talking about human design, which is an amazing science. It's a science of differentiation, and it already synthesizes and integrates several ancient observational systems, from astrology, the Chinese I Ching, the Hindu Brahmin chakra system, the Judaic Kabbalah, and the contemporary disciplines of quantum physics, astronomy, biochemistry, and genetics. So it's already integrating several different things to give you a map. Now, the basis of human design is on neutrinos, which is a subatomic or elementary particle, which is the most abundant particle in the universe. Now, what makes neutrinos different from the other subatomic particles is it doesn't have a nuclear strong force, meaning that it can pass through basically anything, and because it's always oscillating between different states. And it travels really, really fast, but just under the speed of light. Okay, so it's giving us a lot of information when it's passing through us. Each planet impacts the flow of these neutrinos that penetrates us. Okay, and they're what is called neutrino streams. Okay, and so they're coming through, and they're traveling just under the speed of light, and they dramatically affect us every minute. Okay, and they pass right through us, and they're delivering information, and from very far away. You can see in the middle that there's what's called a body graph, and it has all of these geometric shapes, and those shapes are different centers, and we're going to get into that. But so with the neutrino streams, it's important to understand why you would want to put your mind as a passenger and not as the driver, because there's a specific center that you have inside of you where you are receiving the clearest information. All this information is consistently pouring into us, that our different bodies, our energetic bodies, our different dimensional bodies, whatever you want to call it, basically these different aspects of us that receive these different types of information through these centers is really receiving an immense amount of information and processing it a lot of times without us even being aware of it, you know? Yeah, so all you have to do really is tap into your authority. The authority is the part that you want to actually tune into, because this is how you're going to have access to the intelligence of the universe. This chart that you're seeing here, I just wanted to go over this a little bit more. All right, so the human design chart is based on two separate calculations. Normally, you know, a lot of people are familiar with like astrology and other types of systems. It's normally that they only have like one calculation, and it's normally when you are first born, you know, and it's a snapshot of the universe. Now with human design, there's actually two different calculations that create this chart, and they're 88 days apart. Yeah, these two different calculations gives you an understanding of the juxtaposition of your reality, or these two separate time frames of energies that are created within you, you know, the yin and the yang principle, the design and the personality principles, these two creative aspects that are coming into balance to create your experience. And when we look at this, it's really like a genetic map or a blueprint for our life journey. So we can look at this and it gives us a ton of information. When you're looking at the outside of this map, the first thing that you see is that there are all these little shapes on the furthest outside ring. Okay, they're like these little lines, and you know, it's kind of hard to tell what they're doing, but they're basically all composed of 6 lines. These are all hexagrams. They're the I Ching, which correlate to the gates. So you see the numbers in the ring below that, or more inward, the numbers. And those are the gates. And each of those gates corresponds within the centers. So all those shapes inside the body graph. And inwards of the numbers or the gates, you see the ring of the zodiac. Okay, so all the astrological signs. And so what happens is, when we take the calculations of, let's say, your birth, okay, this would be the personality aspect, you would chart on here where the planets are. And that would correlate to the centers, which would correlate to your definition. And giving you the blueprint for how your vehicle processes and receives and transmits to create with the energy that it's dealing with, okay? Because we're all like these little processing units, these vehicles that are here to create with the energy, okay? So if we're not in alignment with it, then we have all sorts of problems. We have health problems, you know, there's a lot of stress in our life, relationships aren't good, jobs aren't good, we're just not happy overall. So a lot of us really wish we had a blueprint. We all have like a natural response to things, but because of conditioning, programming, how you were raised, you know, the era that you lived in with society, like what was going on then, eating habits, all sorts of things really took us away from our true nature or our original unique self and expressing that. So a lot of times what most people are doing is using the mind to run their life. So something will come in, and because of all this years of like repressing your original energy, when something comes in, you just try to decipher it with your mind.
Good question. What is soul mapping?
Yeah, so soul mapping is a school that synthesizes and integrates several different systems. You know, from the beginning, our vision was to start integrating several of the tools, right? So we don't believe that just like there's only one way to the truth, or that, you know, this is the best way and everything else is not correct. It's actually about being able to synthesize many different systems and languages that provide all of us with insight into who we really are. So it's a school, and yeah, we have some courses and things like that. And, you know, obviously individual sessions for people is a big part of it too. But really, we are a team of extractors with our own purposes and in alignment to bring about what we're extracting through reading these codes, and then sharing it with others so that we can all kind of come together and do that. Beautiful.
Let's get started, bringing the light until this mother like the stars did. From the sky as we illuminate the darkness. Our predecessors always knew it from the start that this would be our time. Now you're locked in, inside the box, so when we rock, you know we got this. Medicina pa mi gente, we be dropping. We didn't start the fire, but you can bet your ass we're gonna fuel it. Everything around you is a mirror, and everything inside you is a mirror too. Your mother's calling, tell me, can you hear her?